Easter Sunday, April 12th, 2020. While millions of Americans sheltered at home from a global pandemic, another disaster was about to unfold. Over the next 37 hours, 141 tornadoes would tear through the southeast, killing 32 people and destroying thousands of homes. This was not just a weather catastrophe. It was a collision of crises that would expose how unprepared we are when disasters converge, and how communities struggle to rebuild when everything falls apart at once. The warnings had been clear for days. By April 10th, the Storm Prediction Center issued a moderate risk 3 days out, something that happens roughly once per year. Gulf of Mexico waters had warmed to record temperatures, more than 3.5 degrees above average. Moisture streamed northward, while a powerful storm system carved across the western United States. Forecasters called it an exceptionally rare event. They were right. On the morning of April 12th, the first particularly dangerous situation tornado watch was issued for Louisiana and Mississippi. These watches are reserved for the most extreme scenarios. The Storm Prediction Center estimated tornadic winds of 170 to 205 miles per hour. They were essentially warning that EF5 level destruction was possible. At 11:36 a.m. Central Time, the first significant tornado touched down in Monroe, Louisiana. An EF3 with 140 miles per hour, winds carved an 8-mile path through the city in just 9 minutes. 458 homes were damaged or destroyed. The tornado crossed the Ouachita River twice, struck airplane hangars at Monroe Regional Airport, and damaged a paper mill. But by the grace of God, only minor injuries were reported. Charlie Collins, a 3-time deployed veteran, hunkered down with his 2 children as the tornado roared through Monroe. He would later say it was scarier than anything he experienced on convoy duty overseas. "This is not how anyone wants to celebrate Easter Sunday," he said. 2020 is definitely giving us all we can handle. Then, at 3:39, the day turned deadly. 2 violent supercells tracked across Mississippi that afternoon, each producing EF4 tornadoes with winds between 170 and 190 miles per hour. The first tornado touched down near Hope in Walthall County, killing 4 people before lifting 21 miles later. Just 6 minutes after it lifted, the second and more devastating tornado began south of Bassfield. What happened next was historic by any measure. For 76 minutes, the tornado stayed on the ground, carving a 67-mile path across 5 counties. At its widest near Seminary, it measured 2.25 miles across. The widest tornado in Mississippi history. The 4th widest ever recorded in the United States. Radar showed a debris cloud approximately 5 miles wide. Photos from the tornado were later found 176 miles away in Alabama. Millions of trees were destroyed, creating a scar visible from space on NASA's satellite imagery. Andrew Phillips, a volunteer firefighter in Moss, was listening to his fire radio that Easter afternoon while his family watched an online church service. COVID-19 had closed their church building when he heard the tornado hit the fire station in Soso. "I heard it hit Gaetano. I heard Soso 1 say it just hit their station. I came out, looked on my front porch, and I saw it coming. I knew right then we were fixing to take a direct hit." He yelled for his wife Amber to grab their 2 sons, ages 2 years and 6 months, and get into their safe room. They had bought the house just months earlier specifically because it had a safe room. Andrew grabbed extra pillows and tried to block the entrance with his son's mattress. It lasted 2 seconds. We were maybe in the room a minute and a half, 2 minutes at the most, and it was over with. When they emerged, everything was gone. Their home, their business, outbuildings, obliterated. The only structure standing was the safe room. The more I look at what is left of our house, it makes me think of the tomb Jesus Christ was in. We was in there, Jesus protected us. I would recommend everybody in Mississippi have one. I mean, lives are first, materials are last. Not everyone was so fortunate. Randy Green survived the Bassfield tornado, but his best friend Bobby Williams did not. Everything we done together, Randy said. Bobby was one of 4 people killed at the same location in Jefferson Davis County. Randy spent 18 days at Forest General Hospital, including 5 days in the ICU. He required blood transfusions and multiple surgeries. But because of COVID-19 restrictions, his wife Josephine could not be with him. She had to give consent for surgeries over the phone. I think the hardest part was having Randy. On every phone call he made, he would always ask, "Is Bobby in here too? Where is Bobby?" Randy did not know his friend had died. I saw the devastation around me. I saw that there was nothing left here. Trees everywhere. Bodies everywhere. 2 years later, Randy still passes the spot where he lost Bobby. I think all the time it could have been me. I know that it could have been me. I am just glad he allowed me a little more time with my family. Deputy Robert Ainsworth had served the Lawrence County Sheriff's Office for over 10 years. A United States Marine Corps veteran, he was known as dependable and dedicated. On Easter Sunday, an EF4 tornado struck his home on the Walthall-Lawrence County line. Robert's final act was shielding his wife Paula as the tornado destroyed their home. Both died, but the sheriff's office made clear how Robert spent his last moments. Robert left this world a hero as he shielded Mrs. Paula during the tornado. As darkness fell, the severe weather shifted eastward. Multiple tornadoes struck Alabama. Then, at approximately 8:45 p.m. Eastern Time, an EF2 tornado struck mobile home parks near Chatsworth in Murray County, Georgia. Despite being classified as only an EF2 in intensity, with winds of 125 to 130 miles per hour, it became the deadliest tornado of the outbreak, killing 8 people. Patricia Watson was in her mobile home when the tornado struck. Her trailer flipped 4 times. She had sheltered in. I just covered them just like this, calling on Jesus. Just kept saying, Jesus. Cover us. Cover us. Jesus. She was ejected from the trailer and knocked unconscious. When she came to, she was covered in bruises, cuts, and abrasions. Both she and her husband Chris survived. But because of COVID-19, the Red Cross could not open traditional mass shelters. Instead, survivors were placed in hotel rooms. Patricia worried about virus exposure. Her home had been thrown 100 yards from its foundation. 2 years later, they were still rebuilding. All 8 victims in Murray County lived in mobile homes. The warning was not issued until 8 minutes after the tornado had already touched down. Murray County Fire Chief Dwayne Bain described the scene as a war zone. The longest tornado of April 12th touched down at Chickamauga Battlefield at 11:15 p.m. Eastern Time. The EF3 tornado quickly crossed into Chattanooga, Tennessee, devastating the East Brainerd and Ooltewah areas. For 18 minutes, it carved an 18-mile path, reaching nearly 1 mile wide. 2 people died, 18 were injured, and damages reached $225 million. The tornado damaged 2,718 properties, with 254 completely destroyed. While many slept, a line of storms with embedded supercells moved through Georgia and South Carolina during the pre-dawn hours of April 13th. The timing, between 3 and 7 a.m. local time, made communication with the public extremely difficult. At 3:21 a.m., an EF3 tornado touched down in the dark, tracking nearly 17 miles through Oconee County, South Carolina, with 140 miles per hour winds. It obliterated the Borg Warner Auto Parts plant, where Jack Harville was working as a security guard. Jack Harville was 77 and died instantly. The plant sustained over $100 million in damage and required 16 months to rebuild. Normally, 200 workers would have been at the plant on the night shift, but COVID-19 had reduced operations to just 5 people. The pandemic likely saved dozens of lives that night. At 5:43 a.m., another EF3 tornado carved a 37-mile path through Orangeburg County with 140 miles per hour winds, killing Doris Chavis, who was 68, and her husband Gerald, who was 63, when their home collapsed near Nice's. Then, at 6:10 a.m., the most violent tornado of April 13th touched down near Estill in Hampton County. For 27 minutes, it tore a 24-mile path with peak winds of 190 miles per hour. High-end EF4 intensity. This was historic. The first EF4 tornado in South Carolina since 1995, and the first EF4 ever recorded in South Carolina's Lowcountry region. The tornado killed 5 people. 3 were members of the Breland family in the Nicksville area. Jim Breland, age 59, had worked for 25 years as a supervisor. His wife Donna, age 56, was director of a childcare center. Their daughter Kayla, age 26, lived next door to her parents. All 3 died when the tornado struck their homes on Gin Hill Road. Angie Ginn, Donna's sister, came to the destroyed property later to search for anything salvageable. She found her sister's wedding ring, some jewelry, and family photos scattered across the devastation. I didn't think I'd wake up and it would be me. 2 other victims were Mexican farm workers. Alberto Hernandez, age 41, and Rene Rodriguez, age 25, were roommates and co-workers at a turf farm in the Estill area. Both men were sending money home to their families in Mexico. After the tornado, fellow farm workers erected cross-shaped memorials where the men's bodies were found. They placed flowers, dented cans of beer, and candles bearing images of Our Lady of Guadalupe and St. Jude, a touching tribute to their lost brothers. In a single day, South Carolina experienced 12 EF2 or stronger tornadoes, with 8 rated EF3 or stronger. The most significant tornadoes in a single day in state history. In the seconds and minutes after tornadoes struck, first responders flooded affected areas. In Chattanooga, police and fire departments abandoned their vehicles and searched house to house on foot for trapped residents. By 12:30 a.m., just over an hour after the tornado, a command center was established. By 7 a.m. Monday, emergency responders were organized into 22 teams of 6 people each. By 4 p.m. Monday afternoon, less than 17 hours after the tornado, every street within the affected area had been searched. More than 500 emergency responders were deployed citywide. Chief Phil Hyman of the Chattanooga Fire Department described the challenge. The main focus was answering all of the 911 calls, clearing downed trees, checking damaged houses, and getting people who needed emergency services help as quickly as we could. In Mississippi, first responders faced vast rural areas with catastrophic damage spread across 68 miles. Randy Green's recollection captures what they encountered. I saw the devastation around me. I saw that there was nothing left here and trees everywhere, bodies everywhere. But this disaster response was truly different from any before. For the first time in modern disaster relief history, the American Red Cross abandoned traditional mass shelters entirely. Instead, displaced residents were placed in hotel rooms to maintain social distancing. Monroe Mayor Jamie Mayo secured 200 hotel rooms for displaced residents because the coronavirus made opening an emergency shelter potentially dangerous. In South Carolina, the Red Cross sheltered 236 displaced residents in hotels initially, growing to 600 people within days. Mississippi Emergency Management Agency spokesperson Mallory White issued instructions that captured the paradox. Social distance as best as possible while inside the safe room. Alabama Governor Kay Ivey issued emergency orders suspending coronavirus stay-at-home restrictions where life could be endangered by tornadoes. The American Meteorological Society was direct. Do not let the virus prevent you from seeking refuge from a tornado. Josephine Green's experience, caring for her husband Randy, was made immeasurably harder by pandemic restrictions. Randy spent 18 days at Forest General Hospital, including 5 days in the ICU. But Josephine could not be with him. He had to have blood transfusions, all kinds of stuff, surgeries, and I had to give my consent over the phone. I think the hardest part was having Randy. On every phone call he made, he would always ask, "Is Bobby in here too? Where is Bobby?" Jeff Jelitz of the Salvation Army explained how pandemic depletion affected disaster response. The pandemic has thinned the ranks of volunteers at the Salvation Army, since many of its volunteers are retired and, being older, are more at risk to the virus. We had to look at our typical cadre of workers and shrink it to keep everyone safe. Providing food to disaster victims has also become a challenge, as a lot of stockpiles have been depleted. Stores are no longer open around the clock, and shelves are not always stocked with what is needed. While government processes ground slowly forward, communities mobilized immediately. In Chattanooga, more than 1,400 people signed up for volunteer shifts within days. On the first day of volunteering, over 300 people showed up from across Chattanooga and as far away as Memphis and North Carolina. Pastor P.J. Weeks of First Baptist Church Soso described the immediate response. Jones County came, and Covington County came, and Lamar County, and Forest County, and Wayne County, and Smith County, and Jasper County. It seemed like people from all over the state then showed up right here in Soso saying, "Where do we need to be?" But media coverage and volunteers typically leave tornado-devastated communities after a week or two. The reality is that recovery lasts months, even years, longer. One Chattanooga oral surgery clinic took nearly 2 years to rebuild. Marlon Jump lived in a camper in his backyard for 1 year while his home was rebuilt. The Pritchett couple did not spend Christmas in their rebuilt home until 2021, nearly 2 years after the tornado. Morning Point Assisted Living did not reopen for 7 months. 1 year after the tornado, a Bassfield business owner explained. Still in the process of rebuilding, we did not want to rebuild at that time because the pandemic had created supply chain disruptions, labor shortages, and uncertainty that delayed recovery. As of September 2024, more than 4 years after the tornado, Seneca, South Carolina, was still waiting for $5 million in FEMA reimbursements. Originally estimated to take 2 to 3 years, the bureaucratic process had exceeded even that extended timeline. In Murray County, Georgia, entire neighborhoods had claims denied by Allstate. The insurer said damage was from high winds and hail rather than a tornado, despite the National Weather Service confirming an EF3 tornado. 2 years after the tornado, couples were still fighting insurance battles while continuing to rebuild. Average FEMA grants for disaster assistance were only $3,208 per household, far below actual losses from tornado damage. For the uninsured and underinsured, this created impossible financial burdens. Notably, Georgia did not request a major disaster declaration, so no federal FEMA aid was available for Murray County victims, despite 8 deaths and extensive damage. Research on 516 tornado affected U.S. communities between 2000 and 2010 found sobering statistics. 56% experienced no significant immediate population change. 44% witnessed population decline. Only 11% fully recovered within 2 to 10 years. Displaced households not included in the census create risk of losing federal and state funding based on population thresholds. Population loss affects the tax base and economic vitality. The return of households and businesses are mutually dependent. The loss of one accelerates the loss of the other. Research on tornado survivors found that 13.6% developed PTSD, compared to 0.2% in general population baseline studies. Among 2,000 adolescents from the 2011 Joplin and Tuscaloosa tornadoes, 5% reported suicidal thoughts. Overall, 25% of youths who experienced natural disasters showed disaster-related distress. But in rural Mississippi, nearly 2/3 of people with PTSD were unwilling to seek psychological help. Stigma about mental health treatment in rural communities, lack of accessible services, and cost barriers all prevent treatment. Survivors reported persistent nightmares, sleep difficulties, and heightened anxiety with every storm warning. Anniversary reactions made each subsequent severe weather event re-traumatizing. A Seneca Fire Department official said, "We look at the weather a lot closer now." Parents kept children home during severe weather. The economic impact of work stoppage during warnings created long-term behavioral changes around weather monitoring. Patricia Watson, whose mobile home flipped 4 times in Murray County, captured the ongoing trauma. She asked, "What do? You can't see nothing. You can't sleep because of the nightmares." Total economic losses from the April 2020 tornado outbreaks approached $2 billion. Individual community impacts included Monroe, Louisiana, $250 million. Seneca, South Carolina, $250 million. Chattanooga area, $225 million. But these direct costs do not capture the full impact. Research shows tornadoes reduce income growth in affected counties. Business closures rippled through communities. Lost tax revenue during extended recovery periods strained local government budgets. Power outages affected 1.44 million customers at one time, with more than 4.3 million customers in total were impacted during the outbreak. Some areas went without power for more than 4 days. Rural water systems lacked backup generators. Roads remained blocked by debris for days or weeks. Monroe Regional Airport suffered $25 to $30 million in damage and canceled all flights indefinitely. Schools across affected areas suffered damage, but the impact was magnified because COVID-19 had already closed schools or forced remote learning. Students displaced from damaged schools had to relocate. Online learning was impossible for students without power or internet access. The compounded educational disruption affected thousands of children. Churches and community centers, the social anchors of communities, were destroyed or heavily damaged. First Baptist Church in Soso, Grace Baptist Church, and Academy in Chattanooga, St. Mary Baptist Church in Monroe, and numerous others lost buildings that served as gathering spaces. During a pandemic, when community support was critical, these losses fractured social networks. John Edwards, a lawyer and community development officer in Phillips County, Arkansas, highlighted an often overlooked impact. So many people bought food because of COVID-19, and they are at risk of losing that food. Families had stocked food for quarantine based on public health. Guidance. Power outages lasting 4+ days meant total loss of supplies. Bailey Hutchinson was a young girl in the Moss community. She was sent outside to bring in the family's rabbits as the storm approached. Rain was falling heavily when her mother suddenly started screaming. Mama started screaming to go in the bathroom, and we did. And then we felt it all shaking. It sounded like a train. And then it just hit. She survived with her mother and siblings. But Jessica Marie Spradley, who lived right down the road, died in the storm. 1 year later, Bailey reflected with remarkable maturity. It's not going to be easy, but you just have to focus on what you know you need and what you know you want, and you have to see it through. Research suggests that 44% of tornado-affected communities experience population decline, with only 11% fully recovering within a decade. The Easter 2020 outbreak occurring during a pandemic with compounded economic stress, may have created conditions where recovery is even less likely for some communities. Seneca Strong and Murray Strong became rallying cries, symbols of resilience and community solidarity. But behind those phrases are hard realities.